Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this morning we're visiting with J.D. Mitschke, author of the World Ahead Press, a WND company, book Modern Day Liberalism, exploring the psychological foundations of this disorder. Interesting title, interesting man. J.D. Mitschke, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rabbi. A pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. J.D. resides in Central California, having an extensive educational background in the psychological sciences and holding a master's degree in psychological counseling. He currently offers seminar presentations to groups as well as individual instruction. These consist primarily of instruction in a workshop entitled The Primary Human Emotions and the Structure of the Personality. You can visit his website at citizenoawaken.com for more information. So JD, you were trained up in psychology. You went on your master's degree. You have some practical experience in the counseling field. And in your educational background, as you studied psychology, there's always a component within psychology indelibly linked to sociology in looking at patterns of behavior of societies over the course of time, the historical view of how we evolve as a society with certain core values and certain things that become the focal point of society and societal order. In your education and your studies, did you begin to develop this premise of modern day liberalism, the political, social, and economic aspects of this being a psychological condition early on in your career? Was this part of your thesis, part of your presentation? Or is this something that, based on your experience in dealing with all kinds of people from different walks of life, something that you developed over the course of the years?
I would say the answer is to both of those. It's something that I developed from my experience, from my learning, and being hands-on in the field, so to speak. It's something that developed over time. What I concluded many years ago is that we have essentially a basic framework of primary emotions. Furthermore, every behavior of each and every individual is driven by emotion. There is some emotion driving it. A lot of people say, well, it's thinking that drives my behavior. Not so. It's emotion that drives behavior. And furthermore, that base of emotion is composed of only 5 primary emotions, only 5. Those emotions is an inborn instinctual foundation, and that base, that foundation, is engaged very early in the life of the individual, as early as 6 months of age, a year of age. We can see them at work, and so truly.
Well, JD, let me ask you a question while we're in this particular area. Now, as a minister, ordained, studied, degreed, we look at the 3 aspects of the human creation as body, flesh, soul, and spirit. And we consider that to be the forensic evidence for creation, because God himself is 2 parts invisible, 1 part visible in the incarnate Jesus Christ. So we know that we can't look upon the Father, we can't look upon the Spirit, but we can look upon the Son. Forensic evidence for us being 3 parts, spirit, soul, and flesh. We look at the soul as mind, will, and emotion. We look at the spirit as that connection point between us and God. And we do have a battle that we fight between the spirit man and the soul man, in trying to allow for the God man to reign over the flesh and not walk by emotion. So I would venture to say that my last 21 years have been a battle, like Paul in the Bible, of flesh merge with soul, the emotion, but to allow the Spirit to guide, lead, and direct me more so than my feelings. So in your evaluation of us making decisions based on emotion, is there a clear delineation between those people of faith who are more Spirit-led than feeling-led and have been able to identify, even compartmentalize through a study of God's Word, through a relationship with the Lord, through attendance in church, good teaching, good study habits, building on that faith component which shores up the spirit man and diminishes the soul man or the emotion man? Or is this something that's universal, and no matter how spiritual you think you are, you're still driven by these 5 emotions and you make all your decisions based on that?
I take a little bit of a different stance, Rabbi, in terms of how I separate the components of the individual. I look at the individual as being composed of a 4-component structure. We have the physical, which is quite obvious to everyone. We have a physical body. Next, we have a mind, the intellect. We have a brain. Okay, it's an organ that functions in a certain manner. Next in line, we have the emotions. And we don't necessarily have a brain, so to speak, or a structure for the emotions, but we feel. I certainly I can speak for myself. I feel the emotions in my gut and in my solar plexus, and theoretically I can say that we feel the emotions in the spinal ganglia and so forth. The emotions do not reside in the head, which I think has been a big error in our current milieu of psychology. No, the emotions exist in the body, and they are inborn. I want to repeat that again. They are part of our instinctual foundation. Next, we have a spiritual component. We have an intuitive component, and I rank that as part of our spiritual foundation. Our spiritual foundation houses our soul. I know that each one of us is endowed with a soul. We are part of God in that respect. And I would like to add a further note about the 5 primary emotions. There is one of those emotions, and perhaps we'll have time to talk about it. There is one of those emotions which serves as a driver to guide us in our belief and faith. And I'll go ahead and name that emotion, if I may.
Sure.
That emotion is called jealousy. Now, this results in so much confusion in so many folks that I meet with and talk with. In order to understand what this emotion is, what I encourage them to do is break down the word into its old roots. Okay, when you break it down, the word jealousy comes from the Old Greek zeal, okay, zealous. And from there we can extrapolate that the emotion drives us to zeal, to explore, to want to achieve. And so in that respect, I would posit that this emotion is a driver behind what we commonly know as faith and belief. And an overriding thesis that I talk about in my book, and a statement I make, is that the connection between us and God, truly the emotions are a necessary step in our progression to reunite back with God from where we came. Unless and until our emotions are working in what I term complete harmony and rhythm, we will not be able to experience and practice unconditional love. That is one of the cementing factors, which will reunite us with God. After all, it is written, God is love.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Now, let's move this forward a little bit. Let's kind of take the dial and come into the evolution of what we would consider to be emotionally driven thought as it applies to society and society's move from a conservative biblical worldview, especially in the context of the United States of America, into a more liberal, feeling, emotion-driven response to the individual as opposed to the sum of the parts, which we would call a country, a nation, a government. How did we get here? And when did you start to see the needle shift from peg to conservative biblical worldview, moving towards the center, excuse me, moving towards the center, and then finally all the way to left of center and really pegged deeply into that left side of the center?
Rabbi, when I take the word liberty and I examine the word and I break it down, and it's kind of a puzzlement that liberalism has the word liberty within it. I mean, I think that's quite a paradox. But if we take the word liberty for what it really means, I mean, liberty, justice, equality, fraternity, and all of those good things. You know, the notion of liberalism, people have written about it for a few hundred years now. But I think what happened, now I'm a boomer, I'm part of the boomer generation, and I think my generation didn't start it. I think the seeds were sown decades before that. But this whole notion of liberty has become so expanded and bastardized and distorted. And it really reached a crescendo during the boomer generation, when their philosophy became, I want what I want when I want it. And so they completely distorted the word and the meaning of liberty. Now, what does that have to do with the emotions? Well, the emotions drive behavior. I think, especially with this generation that I just spoken of, the boomer generation, and then the next generation or two that followed, they became a very selfish, self-centered generation. Somehow they learned that the my, me, mine mentality. Their emotions became distorted early in their development, and then one thing led to another, and so hence we have today this far left swing of the pendulum of the liberals.
So we have moved, and I guess we go back to the origin of the Greek philosophers. Aristotle, if it feels good, do it. The operative word is not the good, it's the operative word is feel. And so we look at this cyclical pattern of society that starts out as government-centric. We have a moral compass within the population. The government reflects the moral compass. Something happens that causes the status quo to be shaken. A new order comes in, and the new order reflects a new agenda from the top down that not always reflects what the populace wants, but begins to move it in the direction of those leaders that are the key influencers and the spheres of influence within business, religion, entertainment, publishing, media, as they begin to shape the form, and of course the most critical one being academia, which is the one that raises up the generations. I was born in '52. I know about what you speak, and so I saw it firsthand myself in my lifetime. As we look at this modern day liberalism, let's take a look at some of the events that are taking place surrounding us even today. We have the fiasco over Hobby Lobby with cotton as a decorating item, which is now, to the ideals of one person that's gone viral, is offensive to them because cotton depicts the South and slavery in their mind. And this individual wants to impose her particular point of view upon everyone else in her path. It has gone viral. It has taken off across the nation, and about 75% of the people are completely opposed to her, but you do not hear that represented in the media. What you hear is that Hobby Lobby, there's pressure on Hobby Lobby to remove cotton cotton stocks from being on display for decorating. You have the NFL, which is protesting during the national anthem and the flag, saluting the flag in an attempt to take multimillionaires that have absolutely no connection whatsoever to the plight of a young African American in the inner city that chooses to rob or get involved with drugs and finds himself in an encounter with police. I'm a little confused because I don't have encounters with police. I didn't have encounters with police. I'm not prone to having encounters with police. I don't put myself in places or situations where I would be in a position to encounter police. And certainly there are a number of instances where there's been a great deal of confusion, that there's been an overreaction. Do I believe that it is targeting? I would honestly have to say I don't have enough information, and we haven't done enough exploration and investigation with professionals to determine whether or not there's a predisposition in law enforcement to be inclined to racially profile. I think statistically we look at the incidence of crimes in certain places and we make certain assumptions based on the data, and they respond in a manner which can, it's life and death, it's instantaneous, it is reactive to training, and the more sensitive they are, the more likely a cop is about being shot. So where do you err? If you're going to err, which way do you err? Do you err on the side of an 18-year-old involved in a crime killing a police officer, or do you err on a police officer killing a person who is involved in a crime because he thought he had a gun, but he didn't have a gun, but he was involved in the commission of a crime? This is a very difficult situation that's not a win-win in any aspect, but the response from a minority position, and I'm not talking about racial minority, I'm talking about numerics, I'm talking about the 350 million Americans, the small percentage is garnering the attention and every issue becomes a major distraction. How did we move from of the people, by the people, and for the people to be of the person, for the person, and by the person?
That's a great question, Rabbi. Yeah, I look at these people who become the center of attention, those who refuse to stand and salute the flag at the football games and Hobby Lobby and so on and so forth. And it is puzzling that generally what we find is one person is the instigator. One person becomes the focus of attention, like you say. And what I conclude is that these individuals are driven by intense, repressed hatred Okay, I write in my book that that anger, being one of our primary emotions, one of our five, when anger is unexpressed in a natural, balanced manner, the residual effect is that it's repressed. Somehow, some way, these people, these individuals, become very, very repressed in their behavior. This begins to drive their behavior. Hence, we have the guys refusing to stand and salute the flag at football games. And lo and behold, then others join in the chorus. Well, perhaps they're just identifying with the same emotional dynamics as the person they're supporting. And then soon we have an entire team who refuses to come out on the field to salute the flag. I mean, that's just as ridiculous. And
it is.
And so all of this aberrant behavior begins to affect everyone. And then, as you were saying, it seems that the few affect the many. Well, that's partly responsible, in big part responsible for that is the press and the media, because they play it up. And then we have entering into the equation this notion of political correctness. And
JD, hold that thought right there. We've got to go to a break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to pick up the subject of political correctness, because that's a very subjective term that what's politically correct to you may not be politically correct to me, and all of a sudden we're looking at this individual lexicon of everybody has their determination of what's politically correct. So hold that thought. We're talking with J.D. Mitschke, author of Modern Day Liberalism, brought to us by World Ahead Press, a WND company, exploring the psychological foundations of the disorder. Interesting wording, that liberalism, modern day liberalism, is a psychological disorder. I agree. When we come back, we're going to talk about political correctness and explore more of the foundational truths found in this book with J.D. Mitschke. While we're on break, visit ignitingnation.com, scroll down to today's date, September the 26th, 9/26, and find this book, Modern Day Liberalism. Click on it, order a copy for yourself, and join in with an understanding that modern day liberalism is a psychological disorder. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our one-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with J.D. Mitschke, author of the World Ahead Press book from our friends over at WND, Modern Day Liberalism, Exploring the Psychological Foundations of the Disorder. J.D., welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Before we went to break, we brought up the topic of political correctness. And political correctness is not a society determining what's politically correct. It is driven down to the lowest common denominator of the individual perspective. And your idea of political correctness and my idea of political correctness can be completely opposite. But what's happening today is we are seeing this imposition, someone who is now forcing their definition upon the rest of society, and it is the tail wagging the dog. We've become a country of the 2%ers. 2% of the country is gay, lesbian, transgender, LGBTQ plus whatever. And they're driving the narrative. We have 2% of the population are racially disenfranchised. 2% of the population is touting the rights of the dreamers. 2% of the population is arguing for transgender bathrooms. And the 98% are almost victimized. They're almost terrorized into this inflicting another person's will in the name of modern day liberalism. What do we do about this, JD?
Well, yeah, it's a puzzlement, Rabbi. The 2% drives the 98%. The 2%, they whine and scream and bellyache the loudest. And so I guess the old adage, squeaky wheel gets the grease, I mean, they definitely get it. But how does the 98% combat this? I would say in a big general sense, the 98% needs to grab hold of some really good righteous anger and push back. I don't know what else to say, but they need to push back. I think that there's a problem in our culture in expressing anger. I think a lot of people have a lot of problem with it. I write in my book that anger, and it's one of the 5 primary emotions, it is not a negative thing. Anger is positive. It becomes negative when it's repressed, when people don't express it properly. It becomes distorted, and so then they don't speak up. That I think is one problem in our culture, and this ubiquitous political correctness. People, instead of combating it and pushing against it, they go along with it, and so it just continues to gain in strength.
JD, you have categorized, classified, and identified modern day liberalism as a psychological disorder. It is a form of mental illness in your assessment in the book.
Yes.
In treating people with mental disorders, emotional disorders, those who are not able to fit into the normal structure of society and exhibit deviant behavior, exhibit aberrant behavior, exhibit self-serving behavior, which is the description of modern day liberalism. It's that's enough about me, what about me? It is narcissistic in its very design. It is all about the self without any concern for another's self. It's myself that matters. And if you're not focusing on myself and you're focused on yourself, well, then I have to get louder, stronger, more violent until you'll stop looking at yourself and you'll focus on myself. This is a mental disorder. If we were in a relationship with somebody who exhibited these behaviors, we would strongly encourage them to seek counseling, even medication. So in the normal context of things, we might exhibit anger, but that might not be the most effective way to deal with somebody with a mental or emotional affliction. From a psychological perspective, are there more effective ways of dealing with this overarching psychosis that's driving America? Let me break this down. Have we seen this before in other societies? And what happened to those societies? Are there any lessons we can learn from those other societies around the world that throughout history have exhibited the same kind of thing? Or is this unique to America? Or have we seen it in Canada? Have we seen it in France? Have we seen it in England? Have we seen it in other parts of the world? And what was the outcome?
Well, Rabbi, I'm not that privy to the inner dynamics of so many other countries, especially long past. I mean, we can theorize that the ancient Romans, their culture went downhill because of some of the same dynamics that we're seeing within our own culture. But just to say a word or two about mental illness, see, I think that is a huge misnomer. It should really be called emotional illness. I don't think it has much of anything to do with the mental. I mean, the mental becomes an affected component of the emotional functioning. But unless somebody has something organic missing in their birth and their makeup, it should not be called mental illness. It should be called emotional illness.
I would agree with you.
Because it is. I have to repeat it 100 times, and I will to those I meet up with. The individual is driven by emotion. The emotions become well fixed, and the templates and the hardwiring becomes very well fixed early in the individual's life, ages 1 through 7. I call it the formation and the foundation of basic attitudes. Okay, we can see this manifest. I think all of us, if we were pressed to remember and we're asked the question, hey, JD, have you ever met up with anybody who just has a bad attitude? I have. I mean, maybe you have as well, Rabbi. I mean, have you met up with somebody and they're just sour?
I might have been that person at one point in time.
Well, but then, I mean, there are very, very severe gradations of it. I doubt that you would fit that severe gradation, Rabbi. I mean, as I've gotten to know you here in these few short minutes. But they have a bad attitude. And where did it come from? Well, it came from that previous conditioning. Okay? Now, the real challenge, okay, how do you direct and guide this individual into a counseling milieu? I don't care, if it's the common ordinary psychological counseling or pastoral counseling or whatever. How do you get them in there? That's the real challenge, Rabbi, because everyone has to make that decision for him or herself. I mean, you can't strong arm somebody into counseling if they don't want to go, and that's really a big challenge here in our day and time.
As we look at this emotional disorder, how on the individual level should we deal with it? What should you and I, when we're labeled a racist or we're labeled an Islamophobe or a homophobe, what should our response be in regards to that?
Well, we have to do a certain amount of pushback. Okay, I mean, if somebody aggressively and forcefully is trying to force their notions upon us, I mean, it just depends on the situation. We have to do some pushback. But I learned this years ago, a number of years ago. I didn't know it earlier in life, but I did learn it as I got older and hopefully wiser. But on a more day-to-day level, as I meet up with liberals and they're angry and they're hateful and they're venomous and they're attacking and all of that stuff, the best way I've found to disarm the liberal is to ask them questions. I think oftentimes what we do as conservatives or Christians and so forth, what we do if somebody aggressively comes at us, if a liberal comes at us with their notions and their name calling and all of that, I think we try to dig our heels in and we try to present a contrary dialogue picture of who and what we are. I think the most effective tool to disarm the liberal is to start asking them questions. We ask them questions because, as I write in my book, the liberal does not operate out of a foundation of reason, logic, and common sense. They operate out of a base of emotion. Emotion has no foundation of reason, logic, and common sense. And therefore, when we get into this intense dialogue with the liberal, they finally just become angry and frustrated and walk away and continue to call us a racist, homophobic, xenophobic, whatever.
Here, let's examine for a minute these rallies that are taking place around the country and protesting police brutality. You've got the Black Lives Matter, you've got the white supremacists, you've got the Antifa groups, you've got law enforcement showing up. They start out as filed for a permit to meet, to protest, to march, to do whatever, and then somebody escalates it because violence is what sells in the media. Individuals are getting arrested. This does not represent the best of society. There are people that are paid thugs to go out there and disrupt and don't mind having a criminal conviction on their record. So we have these voices that aren't really informed. They're just incentivized to become troublemakers.
Right.
But yet, there's a platform out there. Yes, of course, Black Lives Matter. Yes, of course, Jewish lives matter. Yes, of course, Chinese lives matter. All lives matter. Life matters. And as a nation, we have done a poor job in some regards, and we've done an incredible job in other regards. And there's no erasing history. Mistakes have been made in every society. I come from a people group that's been persecuted for 4,000 years, but we don't dwell on what was done to us. We dwell on how we can make a difference in the world and thrive in a world of oppression. And so we could sit around and pontificate all day long about how evil the world is and how bad anti-Semitism is and how badly we've been treated throughout history and that every society has persecuted us. But that doesn't put food in our bellies. That doesn't put roofs over our heads. That does not get us the economic security that we need to raise our families, to send our kids and give them a better life than what we had. That's logic and reason at work that says if I dwell on the offense, I'm anchored to the past, I have no future. So how do we get people motivated to begin looking at what positive things to do as opposed to this dwelling on the negative? And what is it about the emotions that cause people who cannot get past the negative? They can never see the positive. And for these Black Lives Matter, they don't have a stated objective. Do they want legislation? Do they want affirmative action? We already have affirmative action. Do they want affirmative action enforced? Well, what industries and what people are violating affirmative action? Literacy rates, 18% functional literacy in the inner city. That's a problem. Do you want literacy centers? Do you want the government or communities or churches to build literacy centers to teach your children how to read, to teach the parents how to read? That's a positive step. Come up with a solution, but this constant identification of this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem, does nothing to move past the problem. Is that part of the psychosis? Is this part of the emotional disorder that keeps people so anchored to oppression, to hopelessness? What is it, JD, that keeps them in this rut?
I will conclude, Rabbi, especially dealing with the need that individuals change a point of view for the betterment of themselves and all. Change always has to begin, I think, with the individual. We cannot change the collective. We cannot change the mass. They're part of the mob mentality. When you watch these people gathering, if it's Black Lives Matter, whoever they are, Antifa, whoever they are, what are they doing? They're spouting these, sporting rather, these placards with 5-word slogans, and they repeat those repetitively. And they're all engaged in this hatred and anger. I like my metaphor of the tuning forks. You know, they all kind of resonate as one. I mean, they're, you know, like attracts like. And so they all resonate as one together. Somehow, some way, change has to begin with the individual. It's person on person. You know, when we die and go through the pearly gates to our judgment, we don't go as a group or collective. We go as one person. And so that's where change has to begin.
JD, in the 60s and 70s, I don't know if you were part of it, but we marched on Washington. We marched on the college campuses because we wanted a specific response. We wanted out of Vietnam. There was an issue with us being involved in backing a failed economic war, putting our soldiers, our friends' lives in jeopardy and taking the lives of those that were caught up on something that France got us involved in. And so we had an agenda. Get us out of Vietnam. We said we were going to do this. We had a goal. The goal was to pull us out of Vietnam. It was specific. It wasn't an overthrow of the government. It wasn't to tear down democracy. It wasn't to burn Washington to the ground. It was get us out of Vietnam. You're killing my friends. You're killing the youth of America. You're destroying and you're putting people in harm's way and causing them to do things that are unnatural, immoral, and not beneficial to this as a nation. And our parents didn't want to speak up against the government, but we're going to be vocal that this is wrong on every level. Get out of Vietnam. I don't hear anything from any of these groups with a goal in mind. What is the goal? If you want there to be less violence and police not responding, fathers, move back into your homes and raise your children. And it's the fatherless that it starts with a social construct of community. And the grandmothers are holding the family together, and they're the ones that are the most heartbroken when Johnny gets shot. But I saw a sign that says, grandmothers shouldn't worry that their grandchildren will get killed committing a robbery. What? It's okay to commit a robbery, but you want to give assurances to a grandmother that your child won't be killed committing an armed robbery? What? This is insanity. How did we get here, and what do we do about this? Because it's going to be I'm not going to say it's the undoing of the nation, but it's eroding the moral fiber of the nation. It's causing us to be distracted from so many good things this country does and so many good things that we could do, but we're hamstrung by this liberal, divisive division that's occurring in America. It's occurring in Washington between the partisanship. It's liberalism for the sake of liberalism. And it seems to be the position of negativity, not a position of anything positive. We're just in opposition to everything everybody else stands for, and we're just a contrarian society. What do we do, JD? We've got 2 minutes left. Give us the answer.
Well, thanks, Rabbi. I mean, you dumped a tough one on my lap.
That's what we do here at Revealing the Truth.
In a big sense, unfortunate sense, we, the people, in great part, not everybody, we have become disconnected from our spiritual foundation. That's a sad state of affairs. Again, these folks who perpetrate this stuff, I go back to the individual. If the individual's emotions were working in harmony and rhythm, if they weren't sitting on a lot of repressed hatred and venomous anger and so forth, they would not participate in these destructful rallies with no goal in mind. They have no goal, like you were saying. In the Vietnam era days, I mean, you and I grew up in that era. I had my first college career in the late 60s. Okay. Yeah, there were protests, but they weren't necessarily destructive. They had a goal in mind. They had achievements that they wanted to have happen. They wanted out of the war because it was an unpopular war. My friends and colleagues in college did not want to go. That was just a fact. So it has to begin with the individual. I don't know what that would entail. Individuals talking with individuals, because that's where change begins. The individual has to get their emotional house in order, because if they don't, this festering disease almost within their emotional structure will continue to erode who they are as a human being. And the curious thing about this, Rabbi, is that even when these misfits and these miscreants, when they get out and they do their rebel rousing and destruction, they in effect are venting some of this destructive emotion. And and the false thing that is presented to them, they actually think that they're creating some kind of catharsis. That, in my view, would be the only thing that they think they are achieving. They are managing to vent out some of this pent-up emotion and anger. Just recently, I was listening to
I hate to cut you off, but we're out of time. It's been a joy to have you on the program. We've been talking with J.D. Mitschke, author of Modern Day Liberalism, exploring the psychological foundations of this disorder, labeling modern day liberalism as an emotional disorder. This is a learned behavior that's programmed into our children by the home environment that they come from. Parents telling their children they can be anything they want and whatever they feel. Whatever it is that matters to them should matter to all those around them. This promotion of the self without any relationship with the one who created them, as if we became all little gods. This is the erosion of society. This is a broken moral compass. Mothers and fathers, stop telling your children that they are the center of the universe. It is God and God alone. God is the creator, you are not. And your child is not a living God. It starts in the home, whether or not you're black, white, red, yellow, orange, green, or purple. This begins in the home, and the lessons we teach our children about a foundation of truth in God, the Creator. And I encourage you to grab a hold of Modern Day Liberalism, exploring the psychological foundations of this disorder. It is through understanding of the problem that we can begin to develop the solutions that we need to take America back. J.D. Mitschke, thank you for being with us here on Revealing the Truth. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.